Dear students, today we are going to discuss about the type of arguments or parameters in the functions. Python supports three types of formal arguments, that is the positional or required arguments, default arguments, and keyword or named arguments. The positional or required arguments are sometimes also called mandatory arguments. First, we are going to talk about the required or positional argument. The required or positional argument means the number of arguments passed in function calling must match with the number of parameters used in function definition position wise. We can understand it with the help of an example. Like in this example, I am using two parameters x and y and I am sending two arguments a and b at the time of function call. When we are calling the function, the argument a would get copied into the parameter x and the argument b would get copied into the parameter y. The code will run successfully because the number of parameters present in the function header is equal to the number of arguments passed at the time of calling. But suppose if we are not passing the second argument at the time of call, in that case the code would raise an error, that is the type error, indicating a message that the positional argument for y is missing. Why? Because the a argument would get copied into the x argument and there will be no value for the y parameter. So it would raise an error message, that is the type error. It shows that every time when we invoke a function, the number of arguments must match with the number of parameters. Keyword arguments. These are the named arguments with assigned values being passed in the function call statement. We can understand it with the help of an example. Like in this example, the function header is containing two parameters, sname and age. The function call 1 is containing age equals to 15 and sname equals to RLP, two arguments. These arguments are the keyword arguments as they are named and assigned with the values. In the function call 2, the argument list is varying. Here I have used first the sname and then the age. But both the function call will give us the same result because the function call identifies the argument by the parameter name, not by the position. When it will be called, the age will get transferred into the age parameter and the name will get transferred into the name parameter. So the output in both the function call would be same. In the third one, in this one, the arguments are not valid because the keyword must match with the name of the parameter. As the parameter name is sname, here the S is capital, but in this one the S is small. So at the time of calling, it would raise an error that the keyword arguments are not correct. Now the next is default arguments. A parameter having defined value in function header is called default parameter or argument. As in the example, this function header is containing three parameters where the two parameters are having the initial value a equals to 5, b equals to 7. These two are the default parameters while x is not, because x is not having any initial value. While defining the default parameter, we must remember this rule that in function header, any parameter cannot have a default values unless all the parameters appearing on its right have their default values. As shown in the first function header, in the example, three parameters are given. The first parameter is not a default parameter, but the second and third are the valid default parameter. B is valid because this is the rightmost parameter, so it can be declared as a default one. A is valid because the parameter appearing in its right is a default parameter. So we can define A also as a default parameter. But the second header is not correct, as in this one the A is not a valid default parameter, because the parameter in the right hand side of A is not defined as a default parameter, so A cannot be defined as a default parameter. A parameter A is valid only when the B is also assigned as a default parameter. A parameter having a default value in function header becomes optional in function call. Function call may or may not have value for it. For example, I have made two function definitions, one for add1 and another for add2. The add1 is having three parameters n, m and a. A is a default parameter with value 2, while the add2 is having three parameters where all three parameters n, m and a are default parameters. The statement 1 is showing the function call for the add1. When we are passing only two arguments at the time of function call, then the first argument, that is 5, would get copied into the parameter n and 6 would get copied into the parameter m, and the parameter a will use its own value, that is 2, because we are not sending any value for the parameter a. So in this case, the result would be 5 plus 6 plus 2, it would be 13. In the second statement, again showing the function call of add1, where I am sending all the three parameters. So the value 2 would get copied into parameter n, the value 3 would get copied into parameter m, and 4 would get copied into the parameter a. It will not use its own value, and now the a will use value 4, which it had received from the argument list. Now the variables are initialized as 2, 3 and 4. So the result for this function call would be 9. The statement 3 is showing the function call for the add2, and here I am passing only one argument. So the one argument, if I am passing, this would get copied into the first argument, that is n. Rest of the arguments like m and a will use their own value, which is defined in the function header. So in this case, the answer would be 4 plus 8 plus 2, that is 14. As I am not sending the sufficient number of arguments in statement 1 and in statement 3, then in these cases, the default argument will use their own values. This is the advantage of the default argument, that if we are not sending any argument at the time of calling, they can receive their own value and they can work on them. Now this is another example where in the function header both the arguments are of default type, and while calling this function it's not compulsory to send any argument as both the parameters are default. In this case the default value of x and y is being used and the answer would be 7. In this example, the function header is again containing both the parameter as a default one, but in the calling we are passing x equals to 4. Now here x is a keyword argument, so the value of x would copy down into the x parameter only. It cannot copy it into any other parameter because it is a keyword parameter. And in this case, the value will be 4 plus 4 and the result would be 8. Now, in this example, again, both the parameters are default parameter, but at the time of calling the function, we are sending y equals to 45. As again, here y is a keyword argument, that is why the value of y will move into the parameter y. Here the x will use the default value and the y will use 45 because in the keyword parameter the matching done on the basis of the argument and parameter name. So in this case the answer would be 3 plus 45, 48. In this example, the same example I have taken, again two parameter, both are the default parameter, but in the function call I am sending only one argument. This one argument will get copied into the first parameter acting as a positional argument. The first is the x, so the 2 will move in the x and y will use its own value. So the answer would be 2 plus 4, 6. And this is all about the passing default argument, positional argument and keyword argument. Thank you.